morning, I'm Maiki Oreta and welcome to Industry Beacon, where we shine a light on the trailblazers, the disruptors, and the industry leaders shaping our future. And in each episode, we'll explore how they're staying ahead in their respective fields, one industry at a time. Now, he's the new face of one of the country's most influential business organizations, known for championing good governance, economic reforms, and inclusive growth. What's his vision, and how will it shape the future of Philippine business? Today, we're speaking to Apa Ongpin, the new executive director of the Makati Business Club, to discuss the biggest issues facing the industry and his plans to drive innovation, investment, and growth. Apa, welcome to the show. Now, so you just assumed your role. You started Jan 1, technically Jan 2 because that was a holiday, like about 15 days on the job. What is the first thing you want to do in this capacity, Apa?
Well, in any organization, when joining any organization that's already very established, the first thing that I do is I sit, I listen, and I learn. Okay? I'm a perennial student, and I need to understand what exactly is the culture of the organization, as well as, of course, the objectives and the different ways in which the organization reaches its objectives. It's a very established group, as I said. It's from 1981. And my father was one of the co-founders of the Makati Business Club. So there's a certain legacy that I'm operating under.
That's right. Your father was one of the founding members of the Makati Business Club, which started in about 1981.
That's correct.
What does it feel like now to take the helm of it?
Well, take the helm is maybe a little bit of an overstatement. There is a board of directors, right? And they're at the helm. I am merely their operative to execute their bidding, right?
Okay.
So I don't set policy. Obviously, I have a voice in setting policy and all of these things, but it's the board, right? I joined MBC because this is an exceptional board of just anything. They're all, leaders in their respective fields and leaders of Philippine business in general. It's a star board, let me tell you. A real privilege and honor, not only to be working with them, but to have been selected by them.
Yeah, who's on the board, Apa?
Ed Chua, formerly of Philippine Shell, is the chairman. No? The vice chairman for the longest time has been, Jaime Augusto Sobel de Ayala, no? Or Jaza, as we know him in business. And then there's a lot of, senior and very respected people who have been on this board for many years. Ramon del Rosario, Joey Quisha, Risa Mantaring, Jose Victor Paterno, who happens to be a childhood friend of mine, Doris Magsaysay Ho,
Right.
Peter Maquera, who is head of Microsoft Philippines, Lito Tayag, who used to be head of Accenture in the Philippines, and I've probably forgotten one or two names, but
Okay.
those are the main characters.
All right, as the newly minted executive director, what are your goals under your tenure?
Well, I'm still working those out, right? As I said, I'm still in the sitting, listening, and learning stage. But certainly my goal is to execute the board's objectives and policies as well as I can in an effective manner.
Okay, what are those objectives and policies, Apa?
The Makati Business Club has always been about developmental business. Okay, that's different from business development. It's business for development of the nation, development of the economy, and so it's all about things like ease of doing business, financial inclusivity, sustainability, transparency, freedom of information. These are some of the initiatives that are ongoing in the MBC's day-to-day thing. No? We engage with government, with civil society, with other business groups, and so on, in order to achieve these objectives.
Okay. Now, I wanted to get your take on the state of the business landscape here in the Philippines, given that inflation averaged 3.2% in 2024, GDP growth is projected to come in at 6.1% in 2025. How would you describe, what's your take on the current business landscape in the country?
Well, as always, there are many things that could be improved, but the government has done a pretty good job, particularly in containing inflation. That is really important to us, but it's important to the poorest of the poor because inflation hits the poor hardest. No? So, we're talking about development. We're talking about freeing people from poverty. Inflation is the enemy there, right? And it's to the credit of this current crop of economic advisors, they've met their targets for the year, with regard to inflation.
Okay, now speaking of the government, APA, the national budget is at 6.33 trillion pesos, which represents a 10% increase year on year. What are your thoughts on the national budget this year?
We've already released a statement. We are more than dissatisfied and disappointed with the way the budget has, in our view, been twisted to serve patronage politics. Okay? Basically, the Constitution itself says you have to give the majority of the budget to social welfare, education, all of these things. And instead, they diverted a lot of that money to local infrastructure projects, which essentially are pork barrel, right? Because they require either certification or approval from local officials, congressmen, that sort of thing. That's patronage politics for you, right? And we don't like that. We think that this is a very, very poor processing of our national budget. We wish the president had defended it more against these interests, but he didn't.
Okay. In your ideal version of the national budget, how would you appropriate? I mean, just generally speaking.
Well, we wouldn't have diverted all of these things to the local infrastructure under the DPWH budget. We also wouldn't have done things like, in order to make the education budget seem fatter, they transferred the budgets of the Philippine Military Academy and the Philippine National Police Academy to the education. Those are never counted there. It was always military and police budget, right? So in order to circumvent that requirement, make it seem like they were putting a lot of money in education, they did that, right? And we've discussed this at length with many different sectors, but the primary thing is, when the budget is formulated, it's done by by the cabinet secretaries ultimately, right? Their departments, and these people know what they're doing, all right? They're experts. President Marcos actually has an excellent cabinet, I think, right? Now, the task is to defend it from the congressmen and particularly the bicameral committee, all right? The bicameral committee. And that process is closed door, right? So when they were doing all of these little diversions and the magic, there's no accountability because there's no transparency. We don't know who is the one who said, oh no, take this out of there and put it there.
What do you think this says about the state of the nation and the state of politics today in the country?
Well, as we have said in our statement, we're really against patronage politics. This budget has been hijacked by patronage politics, right? And, the first thing that we're doing is we're asking the president and the Department of Budget to mark all of these things, these patronage and pork barrel things, for later release, okay? Because if we don't do that, they're going to be used for electioneering. It's an election year. What do you think? Why do you think they moved all of those things to a discretionary budget? So they could tell their voters, oh, ito, galing sa akin, no? So, di ba? So that's the number one thing. And then, as early as now, we want to force transparency and accountability onto the bicameral committee so that they cannot, they cannot shuffle this thing around without being accountable for it.
All right. Now, other key priorities of the MBC, apart from the thoughts on the national budget, what about fixing and strengthening our agriculture sector? How important is that?
This is very important to us. This was this is not a traditional initiative of the Makati Business Club. It was just introduced last year during the term of Bobby Batumbakal, my predecessor, and I think it was a very wise move. Why? You can't really have an industrialized economy unless you have an agricultural base, right? It doesn't make sense. I mean, who is your market? Who is going to buy your industrial products if you don't have an agricultural base? 60 to 70% of the Philippine population is the agricultural base. They're engaged in agriculture, right? That they depend on it for their living. So, I mean, you're talking about financial inclusivity. These are the people who you need to include, and we need to include them so that they can be financed, they can borrow money from institutions.
Farmers that feed the nation. And we're not talking about the big guys in the agri sector. We're talking about
small
farmers. And we need to make it lucrative for them so that we have generations of farmers that can take on the big challenge of feeding the country. And we also need to increase productivity in this sector. How do you suggest we do all of this? Big question, but let's hear from you.
Okay, look, fundamentally, the problem is that the small farmer does not have the resources, particularly capital, all right, to make their processes more streamlined and cost less, right? So bringing in frozen chicken or whatever pork from other ASEAN countries or Taiwan or something like that, that stuff is like half the price of what it costs our local producers, right? Because I mean, they can't help it. They just have really, really high financial costs, right? Because they have no capital.
Right.
So
they need financing. They need modernization.
Yeah. So, they're lucky to get farm gate prices. In most cases, they don't. They don't get farm gate. They get way less than farm gate. So we have to enable them, right? So they can produce goods at a cost which is competitive with the imported goods that we are now seeing. Right now, we are importing 60 to 70% of all the food that we eat. So food security? No. We have no food security, right? And it's not just rice, which is always the hot ticket item. I mean, we haven't, we've imported rice since the post-war period, There was a brief period during I guess the Marcos years, Jess Tanchanco and these guys, they were able to achieve rice self-sufficiency, but it didn't last. It didn't last. Fundamentally, the problem is, it's not profitable to be a farmer, right? So the average age of the Filipino farmer today is like 57. They're old.
Yeah.
And why? Because their kids, They don't want to be farmers. Well, why should they, be locked in poverty forever? So they're looking for jobs in the BPO sector, or they're trying to leverage whatever education they can get, and they become OFWs, anything but farmers, right? Because it's just not profitable.
Yeah.
We have to make it profitable. We have to make our farmers join the middle class and have the disposable income. That's really the overall.
Absolutely. The state of our agriculture sector, which touches on the competitiveness of the nation. If you zoom out a bit and take a look at the Philippines vis-a-vis our other Southeast Asian neighbors, how competitive would you say we are, or how uncompetitive would you say we are?
A lot of that has to do with, I guess, regulation, right? So for many years, for instance, corporate income tax was, 30% or something? It's the highest in the whole region. It's insane. How can we be competitive with that kind of, So finally, during the Duterte years, Secretary Sally Dominguez and, the NEDA under, Pernia and then Kendrick Chua and these guys, they deserve the credit, to be named. They reformed these things. They reformed the tax structure, and it's a big step towards making us more competitive, in terms of regulation and over-regulation. There was no incentive to start a business or invest in the Philippines with this kind of tax structure, right? Why would you do it? Diba? You just start the same business in Thailand and you'll make a lot more money, right? And that's in fact what happened, So, things like automotive manufacturing, which is unusual because it's a domestic industry, right? Most of our other manufacturing is for export, right? It's semiconductors, optics, and all of these things. That's all, we're just an export processing zone, diba? And in fact, most of those manufacturing industries are located in export processing zones. But let's look at the automotive industry. It never progressed. Never progressed. This PCMP, Progressive Car Manufacturing Plan, they carried it out and so on and so forth. But none of those guys really expanded their factories. And now, most of them are just bringing in stuff that they built in Thailand. Like Ford was here. Ford was assembling, diba? And then they realized, what? We're losing money. Let's just build it in Thailand and import it into the Philippines.
Yeah.
Ganun na lang. Diba?
Okay. Appa, I'm going to have to ask you to hold that thought. We're going to have to take a quick break. Industry Beacon will be right back. Please stay with us. Welcome back to Industry Beacon, where we're continuing our discussion with Appa Ongpin, the newly minted Executive Director of the Makati Business Club. Appa, tell us more about the Makati Business Club. This is an NGO started in 1981. Your father was one of the co-founders. How big is it today in 2025?
There's 450 members, more or less, and they're spread across 17 industries. So it's not huge. Compared to the other business groups that exist, but it's quite selective, It's we like to say it's elite, but not elitist. Okay, so we have a lot of the biggest, conglomerates and so on in the MBC. When the MBC was founded in 1981 by Enrique Sobel and a group which included my father, it was an activist organization. It still is now, but at that time, they were seeing, a bit of a gathering crisis in Philippine business. And that was because of, for instance, there were a lot of monopolies, at the time, and the government was really involved in a lot of business. The government, the state, owned a lot of businesses, and you know, they didn't like that, right? So they wanted something. I mean, when I was saying, you know, the government, actually a lot of this was crony capitalism. They were founded, you know, to fight crony capitalism under the Marcoses, right? And under FM, the first.
Where would you say we are now in that fight against crony capitalism?
That's all
Difficult
over.
question.
It's a no. It's no longer an issue.
Okay.
Crony capitalism is not a big problem anymore.
Okay.
As it was in 1981.
What are the biggest problems now to date? 2025. Not crony capitalism. What now?
Well, I wouldn't say necessarily problems. There are issues. There are many issues. One of them is regulation, obviously, and then, you know, what I've mentioned before, sustainability, ease of doing business. These are all the issues, the same issues, you know. But, you know, in that sense, Makati Business Club is still very much an activist organization. But it works with government. It is not an opposition, no? We engage with other groups, with civil society, with the government, in order to try to make the changes in collaboration, not in opposition.
Appa, can you talk to us about female representation in the Makati Business Club? Out of your member base, what's a ratio there of males to
I don't know
females?
in the member base.
Okay.
Remember that the members are corporations, not individuals.
Correct.
Okay?
Correct.
So,
Of those leading these corporations.
well, I guess it must be representative of whatever the ratio is in Philippine business.
Okay.
You know, which is, of course, women are a minority, no, in terms of CEOs and so on. A slight minority. I mean, in other words, if it were representative of the general population, there would be 50% women, but there aren't. It's probably 30 or 40. I don't know. You know, but what's funny is that the organization itself, the staff of the Makati Business Club, there's 34 of us, and only 4 of us are men. Yeah, the rest are all women. So it's a completely women-dominated organization, which I think is great, you know. And well, you know, my life is once again being run by women. You know, I'm used to that.
Okay. All right. If you had to describe the Makati Business Club in one word, Appa, what would it be?
That's a tough question. I suppose conscientious. I would like to say conscientious, because I think our role is to be the conscience of Philippine business. You know, we want to do the right thing. We want Philippine business to do the right thing, and to work towards improvement and change and so on. So I would say conscientious.
Okay. How can the government help you achieve these objectives?
We engage with them. Don't worry. We tell them exactly what we want, right? And you know, it's a dialectic. It's always, you know.
It's an ongoing dynamic discussion. And your outlook for 2025?
2025, I think it's going to be a good year economically. We're on track. You know, the government's economic managers, as I said, have done an excellent job. You know, it's no joke to control inflation, especially in an election year. Huh? So that's going to be their challenge. They're going to be working on those inflation numbers, huh? Especially with this budget. Oh boy, I mean, you're not creating value. You're simply transferring the money to people who are, you know, gonna give it away, and therefore when you're not creating goods, and you have too much money chasing after too few goods. What's that? That's
and it's
inflation.
going to drive inflation,
Yeah.
but not the kind that's really leading to the growth that we want to build the nation.
Exactly. You always, I mean, you're going to have 6-7% growth, GDP growth. Inflation's a real concern, right? But even more so because of this election spending that I foresee.
All right. Well, thank you, Appa. That's all the time we have for this discussion. But thank you for sharing your thoughts, and congratulations on being the newly minted Executive Director of the Makati Business Club. And that's it for today's show. I'm Maiki Oreta. Catch the Billionario News Channel on Free TV Channel 31 and on cable via Cignal Channel 24. Thank you for watching the Billionario News Channel, always on top.